To say that Ashoka, whose devotion to all religious sects is undeniable through his edicts, persecuted the Nigranthas or the Ajivikas is simply absurd. And so is the story of Pushyamitra Śuṅga. Thus, the carbon copy allegation against Pushyamitra may very reasonably be dismissed as sectarian propaganda. Probity of the Divyavdan is also grievously marred by the fact that Pushyamitra Śuṅga is mentioned as a descendant of Ashoka, whereas he did not belong to the Mauryan dynasty of non-Brahmanical background. In fact, this very fact flies in the face of the hypothesis that Pushyamitra persecuted the Buddhists because he was a Brahman and represented fundamentalist form of Brahmanism. There is in fact no concrete evidence to show that any of the Mauryan kings discriminated against Brahmanism. Ashok, the most popular Mauryan king, did not appear to have any vulgar ambition of exalting his own religion by showing up the false gods of Brahmanism. Thus, the hypothesis of a Brahmanical persecution under Ashoka loses much of its raison d'etre. The policy of Pushyamitra Śuṅga appears to have been tolerant enough for the simple reason that if he were against the Buddhists, he would have dismissed his Buddhist ministers. What is more, the court of Pushyamitra's son was graced by Bhagavati Kaushiki, a Buddhist nun. In addition to this, there is overwhelming evidence to show that Buddhism actually prospered during the reign of the Śuṅga kings, and it has actually been argued that archaeological evidence casts doubt on the claims made by Buddhist texts that the Śuṅgas persecuted the Buddhists. An archaeological study of the Sanchi Stupa proves that it was enlarged and encased in its present covering during the Śuṅga period, and the Ashokan pillar near it appears to have been willfully destroyed, but this event may have occurred at a much later date. The Bharhut Buddhist pillar inscription of the time of the Śuṅgas actually records some additions to the Buddhist monuments during the supremacy of the Śuṅgas. The Sri Lankan chronicle Mahavansh admits the existence of numerous monasteries in Bihar, Awadh, Malwa and surrounding areas during the reign of King Duttgamani, that is between 101 to 77 BCE, which is synchronous with the later Śuṅga period. It may not be possible to deny the fact that Pushyamitra Śuṅga showed no favor to the Buddhists, but it is not certain that he persecuted them. The only thing that can be said with certainty on the basis of the stories told in the Buddhist texts about Pushyamitra Śuṅga is that he might have withdrawn royal patronage from the Buddhist institutions. This change of circumstance under his reign might have led to the discontent among the Buddhists. It seems that as the consequence of this shifting of patronage from Buddhism to Brahmanism, the Buddhists became politically active against him and sided with the enemies, the Indo-Greeks. The Greek struggle with Pushyamitra gave the Buddhists the prospect of renewed influence. What may be sensed is that strategic reasons made some Greeks the promoters of Buddhism and some Buddhist supporters of the Greeks. This might have incited Pushyamitra to put them down with a heavy hand. Thus, if in some parts of Pushyamitra Śuṅga's kingdom a few monasteries were at all pillaged, it must be seen as a political move rather than a religious one. Moreover, In such cases, the complicity of the local governors also cannot be ruled out. Jaiswal has referred to another interesting aspect of the declaration made by Pushyamitra Śuṅga. It was made at Shakal, the capital and base of Menander, setting a price of 100 dinaras on the head of every Buddhist monk. The fact that such a fervid declaration was made not only at a place which was far removed from the center of the Śuṅga regime, but also in the capital city of his arch enemies, points to reasons motivated by political considerations. After Ashoka's lavish sponsorship of Buddhism, it is quite possible that Buddhist institutions fell on somewhat harder times under the Śuṅgas, but persecution is quite another matter. Thus, it would be fair to say that where the Buddhists did not or could not ally themselves with the invading Indo-Greeks, Pushyamitra did not beleaguer them. In any case, after the end of the Śuṅga dynasty, Buddhism found congenial environment under the Kushanas and the Shakas, and it may be reasonable to assume that Buddhism did not suffer any real setback during the Śuṅga reign, even if one could see some neglect or selective persecution of Buddhists. Far more than the so-called persecution by Pushyamitra, the successes of the Vishnuite propaganda during the last 2 centuries of the ancient era led the Buddhists into danger, and this was all the more serious in what it was long time before its threat was. So what I have said in this lecture is that after the removal of the Mauryas from the political scene, the Indo-Greeks, who were basically relatives of the Mauryas, considered themselves as their natural inheritors of the throne at Patliputra. So they may have invaded Pushyamitra Śuṅga and harassed him to control political power at Patliputra, and because they were Buddhists, and because under Pushyamitra Śuṅga, royal patronage to some extent may have been withdrawn to Buddhist institutions, so the Buddhists within the empire of Pushyamitra Śuṅga may have felt it kind of convenient or beneficial to side with the Indo-Greeks. And as a result, perhaps at some places, Pushyamitra Śuṅga may have been a little bit severe with the Buddhists wherever they tended to collaborate with the Indo-Greeks. And in other parts of the empire, of course, we do not really seem to come across any credible examples that Pushyamitra Śuṅga persecuted the Buddhists. So the stories given in Ashokavadana and elsewhere that Pushyamitra Śuṅga was a persecutor of Buddhism doesn't appear to be credible. Wherever he took some action against political institutions of the Buddhists or Buddhists themselves, it was more of a political move rather than a religious move. So Pushyamitra Śuṅga cannot really be called a persecutor of the Buddhists. Thank you.